So excited to read some. Hey, what are you doing here? What am I doing here? I'm scheduled today. I'm the one reading the true scary stories. You're scheduled to read the true scary stories? What? This is. You know what? How about we both read some true scary stories? Sound like a deal? Kiss Kiko if that sounds like a deal to you. Mwah. Go ahead, grab your headphones, grab some snacks, and some water, or a drink of preference. And my girl, what you do? You purring. You purring? Do you want to tell the people how happy you are? She got snot all over it. It's pretty gross. For spooky music and noise distraction cancellation. Did I say that right? Noise distraction cancellation? You know what I mean. I'm gonna play some spooky music to set the mood. My cat is very distracting right now. I apologize. She's knocking things off. This first one is titled, My Wife Stepped on Something in the Lake. The next day, they found a body. This is a pretty short story for something so morbid, but let's read. A few years ago, when my daughter was a toddler, my wife and I used to take her to a nearby lake to picnic, swim, and just unwind. It was a peaceful spot, quiet, not too crowded, the kind of place where you could easily forget about the world for a while. One afternoon, after we'd finished eating, my wife decided to go for a quick swim while I stayed on the beach with our daughter. I watched her wade out into the water, the sun sparkling off the surface. A minute later, she suddenly stopped and turned to me, shouting something. At first, I couldn't make out what she said, but her expression was off. Then I heard her clearly. I think I just stepped on someone's face! I froze for a second, thinking maybe she was joking, but the look on her face wasn't playful. It was pale, almost terrified. She quickly started making her way back to shore, her legs moving faster. She couldn't get out of the water fast enough. When she got back to me, she was visibly shaken. She said that while she was swimming, her foot brushed against something soft. And at first, she thought it was a rock or a weird patch of seaweed. But when she pressed her foot down, she felt the unmistakable shape of a face beneath the water. A nose. An eye socket. Oh my God. By the way, I have no clue how they vet these stories or how this Reddit is monetized. I don't know how they can tell whether these stories are true or not, because some people can just go on the internet and claim a story is true and it not be true. So whether or not these stories are true, I don't know. We read and we decide for ourselves using our I can't use mine. Using our cognitive skills. Anyway, back to the story, sorry. She swore she felt the hollow of the eye. I considered going in to check it out, but something stopped me. The unease in my gut, maybe. We decided to pack up and leave right after that. The next day, the local news reported that a young boy had been missing for days, was found drowned in that same lake, not too far from where we had been. He'd been there the whole time, just beneath the surface. To this day, my wife is convinced she stepped on his face. That is so creepy. I can't imagine. First of all, a young boy, that's incredibly sad. Hold on, there's an update. This was the year 2000, a while ago. Oh. And he posted this 2 years ago. So this was the year 2000, a while ago. He's fine, but I don't think she would have been fine if she had reached out. Or I had found the body and pulled it up. It's a small lake, almost a pond. The police said the body was not found where we were, which was at the public swimming area. We think they were either lying to avoid alarming the public or the body drifted. In hindsight, obviously, we should have reported. We were young and silly and allowed denial to creep in on the way home. That all went away with the news story. This is why swimming in lakes and rivers is terrifying to me, even swimming in some NJ shore beaches that are close to the NYC because of the possibility of brushing up against a body. So terrifying. I'm so sorry your wife went through that. That's actually horrifying. I can't imagine. That's something that would stick with me for the rest of my life if I was the wife. Even just being the husband or someone hearing that story, that will stick with me. But having experienced that and actually knowing for 99.9% certainty that that was an eye socket and a nose. You couldn't convince me otherwise. I don't blame her. I feel like the body may have drifted. Oh God, but when was it found? Like, do things move that far and fast under the water? I felt like if it was a body, it would be, well, actually, I was gonna say if it was a body, it'd be heavy enough, but I forget that as our bodies decompose, especially in water, we get very light and bubble up. And that's why people put heavy things inside of a bag if they're covering up pieces of a body, or that makes sense if it did drift off and it was found there. I'm not sure if the police would lie about that. Maybe, but I'm not so confident. The OP has another one that I found, another comment. I totally understand why some reviewers are upset that we didn't call the police right away. In hindsight, we probably should have, but at the time, we were in shock and in denial. Before the report, we didn't know for sure that my wife had stepped on, and there was a hope that it was something else. Maybe a rock, debris, or even just her imagination, which might still be the case. That is very true. That could very much still be the case. It could have been a weird looking or feeling rock with a nose shaped bump on it and an eye socket for a crater like that. Hard to believe, but not impossible. It wasn't until we saw the news the next day that we realized that might have actually happened. By then, it was too late to do anything. Looking back, we probably should have acted differently, but in that moment, it didn't feel real. Thank you for your concern, and I appreciate the feedback. It's good to know that so many would have done the right thing in that moment, even without the benefit of hindsight in news reports. Honestly, I feel like if it was me, if I was the wife, and I were to feel something with my toesy woesies or even my hands under the water, first of all, I would freak the fuck out. I have a very big irrational fear of not just water, but like very deep water, and then also big things under the water and unknown things under the water. Feeling stuff, even when I was on a friendcation and we went, it wasn't like, I can't remember what we did. I'll put it here. But we were doing that, and as I was holding on for dear life, I could not make it around the last the last turn. So it would be like we start at the start and then we go, and then it think, and then it turns us, and then think again, and it goes around in the circle. And so as I'm holding on in the water and I'm like surfing the water, I make it to the last one and I'm trying to hold on, but every single time I fall. But every single time that I fell and off and into the water, I would feel all of the seaweed and just the plants in the water just like touching me. And I had to keep myself so calm because I swear to God, I almost freaked out, and I probably would have had a panic attack if I didn't tell myself it's gonna be okay, it's fine, it's just plants. But like, it was so scary to me. So first of all, I would freak out if I felt something under the water that I wasn't supposed to. And second of all, if I were to come out and tell a partner or somebody that I feel like I felt that, I would call the police. That makes sense. Call the police, call 911, and let them handle it. Because even if it was a body and you weren't unsure, but you wanted to find out, the right decision, the correct decision would not be to go check for yourself because you want that body to stay put. What if that was the drop-off site? We don't know. You could mess with any evidence, even though it's in the water, but you don't want to put your hands on that situation. So definitely call the police. That is a creepy story. I'm so sorry y'all went through that. This next one is titled, Came Across an Incredibly Creepy Family a While Back. Very short and sweet. Let's see what they mean by that. Never really post anything on Reddit, mostly just reading, so please excuse me if I do or say anything that isn't common courtesy here. In around 2018 to 2019, I, 25 female, at the time was 18 to 19, was living in Nebraska where I grew up. I lived in the largest city in NA, but it was still essentially surrounded by corn and wheat fields. The city was expanding, so rich folks started building huge houses with giant properties on the edge of town as things proceeded to grow. All of this being said, I had a good friend whose parents' house was one of those big ones right on the blurring line between the fields and the city. My friends and I were constantly hanging out at his place because it was fun. They had tons of property to ride 4x4s on, a hot tub, a huge living room for us to watch sports and have reality TV binge sessions, etc. This sounds like a time. I would love to be there in that house with you guys. I feel like I'm already there. It's so nice when loved ones or friends back then had a place that felt like a second home to you. That is like, I love that feeling. Anyway, let's continue. Plus, his parents were super cool and we could drink out there as long as we stayed at the house. It was tons of fun. Oh, what's the drinking age in Nebraska? We all underage drinking? Okay. It was tons of fun, even though I am quite scared of the dark. So I would just not go outside after a certain time because there was little lighting and the nearest neighbor was about a mile away. Oh, so it definitely was one of those properties that has a lot of land and like every neighbor is like a football's field length away from you. I always felt a weird energy driving to from his place if it was at night, but never had anything happen until this one night. The drive out there was a long winding two-way road that had thick trees on both sides, and you pass on one of the city's largest cemeteries on the way. Barely any lighting, of course, besides the street lamps every once in a while, and very little traffic. It's all inherently a bit creepy, and I'll admit to having sped through this section of the road many times to get through it as quickly as possible. Girl, I do not blame you. I hate driving in these kind of roads. But please, still be careful. This specific night was perfect spring weather, so I was driving with my windows down, listening to music, and it was around 10 p.m. I was coming around one of the curves in the road when I had to essentially slam on my brakes. Right there in front of me, in the middle of the road, maybe 50 yards away, was what looked like a family. Again, picture a completely black road with thick forest on both sides and only my headlights to show what's in front of me. That's very creepy. This was a family of 3, maybe 4, a tall, slim woman, an average height, weight man, a child, short hair but couldn't tell the gender based on the clothing and couldn't see their face, maybe around 8 years old, and the mother was pushing a fucking stroller. Their clothes looked normal, not tattered, but not nice. They also were not carrying any kind of light source, meaning before I arrived behind them in my car, they had been walking in the pitch dark. Ran him over. No, I'm just kidding. There's a child. No, that is so creepy. What the heck? I had turned my music down to hear if they were speaking, had music playing, etc. They didn't. The hairs on my arms immediately stood up. I came to a stop in the road behind them, obviously, and just sat there for a moment to let them move. They seemed to be completely unaffected by me and didn't even turn their heads slightly, nor did they attempt to move out of my way. I literally thought I was going insane or that I was dreaming. It was so surreal. Because I really had time to fully process and register what I was seeing and how truly strange it was, they all, at the same time, stopped walking and very slowly turned to face my car. They hit the... just like that. Oh my god, that is so creepy. This scared the absolute shit out of me. I honestly didn't even give myself enough time to look at their faces as they turned. I immediately threw my car in reverse and sent it backwards for probably a full 20 seconds before flipping a U-turn, nearly running myself off of the road and booking it the other direction. The only thing I remember noticing is that the stroller looked to be completely empty. This was the part that sticks in my mind the most. I've never felt terror like that in my life. I checked my rearview mirror probably 1,000 times before getting to a main road and never saw a glimpse of them. In fact, I never saw a glimpse of them ever again. I tried asking my friend and his family about it, only to essentially feel like I was insane because of the way they looked at me. Oh God. Every time I tell this story, I get one of the three reactions. They immediately think I'm a fucking cuckoo. They think I'm lying or have something sort of similar happen to them. I don't really care if no one believes me, honestly, and it still is the creepiest thing to ever happen to me. I think about it all the time. It was either some weird ass family trying to scare the shit out of someone, a distraction for an attempted robbery, assault, etc., or it was something more sinister. I'm going to tell myself for probably the rest of my life that it was the first option. No, jeez. There's this one video that I see online that it from the jump, from the first moment I saw and I watched it, chills up my entire body, and I hated it so much.
I hated it so much, in fact, that I had to give myself exposure therapy. So when I was watching creepy, scary, spooky stories and that video would pop up, I would force myself to watch it because it was so creepy. I would want it to live inside my mind and scare the shit out of me all the time.
These guys were in their car, the headlights was on, and it was like a weird figure in a white dress with very long hair and a cane, just like running and being all weird and shit. And it was like making these weird freaking creepy noises, and I just like, this is what this reminds me of. But an entire family? I don't even know. That's some Resident Evil type shit that you would find. That's extremely unsettling, and I believe you. I'd have done the same damn thing. I believe you, and this story is absolutely terrifying and it creeps me out, but also feels familiar, having grown up in a farm town that was often pitch black at night. I have seen things that I am not sure where of these world. I'm thinking about it, and I've never lived on a farm, but I'd imagine there's a lot of people walking on foot or a horse's carriage or whatever, just minding their business on the road. And you may get that every now and again or every day, depending on how busy. But in the pitch black, curvy road like that, no light, no vehicle, an entire family is very creepy. Oh my gosh. Let's move on to the next one, and I think this next one is super long. Bear with me. This will be the last story we read today. My emotional support candy. On hand. Giggles, not sponsored. They're just a great alternative to my favorite candy, Skittles. So, healthier alternative. Forgive me, guys. I forgot to mention the story's title. It is I Went to a Serial Killer's Lair. Hello, Redditors. Here's a story I have never told anyone, partly because elements of the story are just not appropriate in most social situations. As a result, I've locked this away in my memory, and I rarely think about it. Fair warning, the story does involve some sketchy sexual situations, but does not describe any actual sexual acts. And as a disclaimer, I am completely aware that this story involves me being very stupid and careless. I'm not going to inject these acknowledgments into the story, but rest assured that in hindsight, I am aware of the foolishness that took place, and I don't need to be chided on that topic. I don't think I've heard that word before. Chided? Gonna look that up. Scold or rebuke. Chide. Cool. I learned a new word today. Now, where do I begin? The year was approximately 1998 to 1999. That's the year that I was born, and my boyfriend. I was a young gay man. Are you no longer gay? I'm just kidding. I was a young gay man in my early 20s, living in a medium-sized city in the Midwestern US. This was sort of an in-between transitional time for gay people, where in most populous areas we had enough respect to live openly, but there was still plenty of people who did not like us. It was well before the invention of smartphones, and the internet was still in the early stages of mass adoption. There were large communities online, but it was not yet at the point where most Americans were online. Online socialization consisted of chat rooms hosted by various services like AOL, Yahoo, or IRC servers, and message boards were still in the use by large numbers of people. I remember AOL. I remember my dad's old ass block computer that I would play on, and had to use the AOL sign in. That's so old. Wow. What a time. Am I right? Oh my God. For many gay men at that time, it was nothing short of revolutionary. Prior to the internet and to the broader cultural changes, gay men had been stuck looking for fun and secretive and or shady places due to the inability to freely express ourselves. In the 90s, it was still somewhat risky, but the internet offered a way to talk freely and relatively anonymously without the risk of being outed or worse. For this reason, it really took off in the gay communities, and gay men were a very large part of the user bases for these social platforms. It was suddenly very easy and relatively safe to find dates, friends, or just sex, and it quickly became the norm for a lot of gay men. I'm not going to try and interject so often because, like I said, this is a very long story, but I don't know, I feel like that would be such a big relief. Obviously not as relieving as being openly, proudly, publicly gay, but I'd imagine it felt like a massive relief being able to express your sexuality online, especially for something so new and fresh. On the other hand, being such a new communication tool for most people, we were sometimes blind to the risks. Being an attractive young man in my prime, I made liberal use of the online communities to find dates. That is to say, I had plenty of hookups, my city had a decent number of chat rooms and personals, message boards, and I had mostly great experiences. I met the typical assortment of good guys, closet cases, and weirdos that you'd expect. I wasn't an absolute hoe by most standards, but suffice to say that a cute gay at that time could generally have a lot more dates than your typical straight person, lol. I'm assuming he meant gay man instead of gay twice. Gay dos. Gay do. It's funny. At some point during this time, I'd had some brief chat on a message board with a guy from my city. I forget his screen name, it's been over 20 years, so let's call him Slim Guy 65. This back and forth had happened on a general thread in the gay section, not in private messages, so it was visible to anyone who chose to read that thread. Nothing had come out of it, but about a week later, I received an email from an unrecognized address. The email basically said, "Hey, I'm not gay, and I don't agree with the gay lifestyle. I'm just here because my friend met this Slim Guy 65 person from this message board, and the guy really hurt him. I don't want this to happen to anyone else. My friend tried to tell the police, but they wouldn't do anything. I see you were talking to Slim Guy 65, so just be careful and stay away from him." That's weird. Why would you... I read the guy really hurt him, but I assumed emotionally, but they mentioned calling the police, so maybe it was more than emotional. Let's keep reading. That's strange. What did this person mean by really hurt him? Exactly. What do you mean by that? Was his heart broken? Exactly. Did he get beaten up or verbally abused or what? I responded to the email asking for clarification on what exactly happened. I never received a response. I was slightly weirded out by it, but on the other hand, it's an anonymous email from someone who doesn't respond and is vague about their warnings. This could be anything. It could be some disgruntled ex trying to mess with the guy. It could be a real warning about someone gay bashing. It could be someone trolling who doesn't have anything to do with anyone. I kept it in the back of my mind, but pretty much shrugged it off. Several weeks later, I had a weekday off work and decided to take the internet to fish for some dick. dick. With goes down some dick. As was my custom, lo and behold, I had an email response to a personal ad. It was Slim Guy 65. He was offering to meet at his place to hang out and just have a good time. Wink, nudge. Got it, queen. I won't go into details, and as I recall, there weren't really many details discussed, other than the small talk and intros we'd done previously. Nothing about this guy was really sounding interesting to me, but I had no other offers on this day, so I decided, why not? I'll go see what this dude is about, aka how his stroke game is. Okay, I understand. As I typed my reply, I suddenly remembered the strange email I'd received warning about this person. I went back and reread it, still vague, still presenting more questions and no answers. Should I take this anonymous warning at face value and just ignore SG65? Ellipsis. I decided to go check him out anyway. His address was on a rather busy street in the middle of a dense residential area, not some shack out in the woods, and I can handle myself. If he's weird, I could just fuck out there. Before long, I arrived at the house at the agreed time. It was a duplex-style house with one apartment on the ground floor and one on the second floor, part of the row of several identical duplexes. Identical? What the fuck? Part of the row of several identical duplexes. It was the middle of the afternoon. There was plenty of traffic on the street and the occasional person out on their porch or in their backyard. I pulled up the driveway to the parking area behind the house, got out, and knocked on the door. The guy that answered was a pretty normal, kind of mosey looking man, probably in his 40s, slight, slim build. Oh god. My lisp. Soft spoken, looked like any guy working in an office cubicle somewhere. Not really my type, but honestly, my curiosity was piqued, and I had nothing better to do. So I stepped inside to take a look around and gauge the situation with the warming email fresh in my mind. God. No judgment. You said you already understand, so you already know you could have been smarter with this, but let's digress. I stepped into the back door, into the kitchen. It was very clean and there was nothing out on the counters and no table and chairs or anything. That is to say, it did not look like someone was living there. It had been kept up and cleaned, but looked empty. Looking out into the apartment, I could see that it was not set up as a living space. A large window with sliding glass was between the kitchen and living room, and I could see what looked like a large table out in the living room area. SG65 said something like, "This isn't where I live. A friend of mine used to run a doctor's office here. I maintain the building for him. It's private though. We have the place to ourselves." Weird. Okay. Shut the back door and locked it with a key deadbolt, the kind that you need a key to open. Oh. Even from the inside, and put his keys back in his pocket, saying, "So what do you want to do?" "I don't know, sir. You invited me here. What do you want to do?" Oh, weird. You know who this is making me think of? Jeffrey fucking Dahmer. Let me find out you actually went to this dude's house. At this point, my danger sense spiked. This is not a normal home. And why is he locking the door like that? It's not necessarily suspect. A lot of people have that sort of lock on their door, and the door has a window, so it even makes sense. Still, something is not right here. I can tell. And now I'm locked in. I asked him why he is locking the door like that, which immediately flustered him. He was looking rather nervous, and his voice was a little wavery and halting. Not quite stuttering, but almost. He said, well, we don't want someone to come in and interrupt us, right?" Flashing a weak, unconvinced smile, his demeanor and body language were all I needed to confirm that this guy was up to no good. Or at least there was something he was hiding. However, I could tell that I was intimidating him. I was not a particularly muscular kid, but I had a larger frame. Even when I am at my very thinnest, I will still wear size large tops and 36 waist pants. So I look big, which people tend to interpret as me being stronger than I really am. Also, I'm not a tough guy at all, but I have a resting facial expression that makes me look like a badass thug. Hell, people who don't know me often assume that I'm rough or something. I got that a lot, so I understand. I sometimes use this to my advantage while I can, because before long, a new acquaintance sometimes will eventually figure out that I'm a total wimp. LOL. But this was definitely an occasion to play up the tough guy appearance, and I did exactly that. I put on my best steely face and told him to unlock the door, and that I don't want to be locked in here. He looked for a moment like he was going to pee his pants, then he said, "All right, I'll unlock it." He unlocked the deadbolt, and "I'll just lock the knob here." And he turned the little dial that locks the doorknob. That was fine with me. I continued to stare at him until he said, "I'll leave the keys on the counter right here." And he set his keys down near the sink. I was relatively satisfied with the answer. At this point, though, my adrenaline was flowing. I was almost in full fight or flight mode, but I was stuck in this place. The guy was between me and the door. I was freaked out, but this little weasel did not appear to pose any immediate threat. Weasel, that's crazy. I could tell that his pants pockets were empty and that I was intimidating the living hell out of him. I didn't know yet exactly what to do. Now keep in mind that despite my wordy descriptions, this all happened very quickly, without any real long pauses. It had only been maybe 1 to 2 minutes since I had stepped into the door. This all happened at the pace of a conversation. The guy was obviously nervous and trying not to appear so. He said, "Well, let's go in," and walked a wide path around me through the kitchen into what would normally be the living room and toward the hall to the right from there. I was familiar with this floor layout. It was very common in this area. The hallway would lead to two small bedrooms with a bathroom in between them. I hesitated, thinking I should just walk out that back door and take off. But really, now I was super curious. I knew there's no way in hell I'm doing anything with this guy, but I want to see what's going on in here. Also, I'm confident that he can't take me if it comes to a fight. So, I slowly headed toward the living room. Oh, God. See, this type of situation, men, I cannot imagine my 5'2" ass having experienced this right now. He'd probably have taken me down already. I can fight. I can wrestle. I can put up a good fight, tell you that. But it's just... It felt like I was walking in slow motion. From the kitchen entrance, I could see a large rectangular stainless steel table taking up a lot of the living room space. I remember thinking, this looks like a surgical table. Ugh! It looked like it could rise and tilt, and it had a recessed channel running all the way around the edge. In hindsight, I now know what that was. It was 100% a mortician's table. Dude had a mortician's table in there. But at the time, I thought it was like a medical table of some sort. There was some other office type cabinets and stuff around, I think, but now all I remember is the table in that room. The large front window looking out onto the street was covered by vertical blinds that were closed. G65 said something like, "This used to be a doctor's office. Like I said, come on back here." He even said it like he was at an office and he was the doctor. "Come on back here, let me check you out." The hallway revealed the room setup that I expected. The first bedroom door was closed. The second door was open to a small, very clean bathroom. At the end of the hall was the other bedroom, which looked like, if the doctor's office story was true, had one time been converted to an exam room. He said, "We can go in that room if you want. Go ahead, take a look." And he stayed by the other closed bedroom door. Sus. The back bedroom door was open, and I could see that the walls were covered in a honey-colored wood paneling. The type you might see in a den or office that hasn't been updated since the early 1970s. I slowly took a few steps down to that door, trying to be very aware of what Mr. Creepy was doing behind me. He didn't move. Sus. When I got up to that room, the first thing I noticed was the door had a keyed deadbolt lock, like the back door. This room locked from the outside. I wondered if there was a lever on the inside, but I pretty much knew the answer to that question without needing to check. I also saw a chair, a non-swiveling plastic desk chair with thin metal legs sitting near the center of the room. The room had old, dark carpet and those wood panel walls. I noticed that the walls were completely paneled with no windows. And I know that room had at least one window, probably two, so whoever did that paneling went over the windows. Oh, that's so... I don't like that. There was also a phone in there, plugged in and sitting on the floor. It was an old office phone, probably from around the 80s or early 90s. Dingy beige plastic with several buttons to manage different phone lines. Just sitting on the carpet near the wall, with a chair at a slight distance facing the phone. There was nothing else in that room. I was standing at the threshold of that room with one foot slightly in, absolutely not going past that door. I looked back at the dude. He was still standing by the other door, just nervously smiling at me, trying hard to look casual, but obviously very nervous or something. He had said something like, "Well, what do you want to do?" Instead of answering, I felt around the backside of the deadbolt lock. Sure enough, nothing there but the smooth wood of the door. It also dawned on me that I did not see a light switch anywhere for the ceiling lamp. Where was the switch? Who knows? It should have been just inside the door, of course, but that original switch was covered up by the paneling. Oh no. He mumbled something about not having the key to that lock. Don't worry about it. I turned back to face the guy and just said, "What is it that you want to do here?" My skin had gone ice cold as I realized that I was way too far into this apartment. I was running through my options in my head. What is this guy going to do? He doesn't appear to have any weapon or anything in reach, but who the fuck knows what goes on in this place? What are you trying to do? He was almost totally derailed by that. He stammered out some hot man-to-man fun with the weakest smile I've ever seen, looking like he was just a hair's breadth away from panicking. That sounds comical, but really, that sentence was probably the most chilling part of the entire experience for me. It was the way he said it. He had to come up with something on the fly, something that would sound plausible, and he failed. Who says that in real life? Do you want to have some hot man-to-man fun? Nobody. It's something you'd see on an advertisement for a cheesy porn site. Some hot man-to-man fun. Smile, quivering lip. That was it. I said, "Nope, I want to go home. I'm leaving." He said, I quickly walked past him as he flattened himself against the wall to avoid me. I noped right out through the living room dissection area and through the kitchen to the back door, which was thankfully still not deadbolted. The keys were still on the counter. I let myself out the door and didn't bother closing that. As I saw him slowly coming to the door behind me, I deliberately walked, not ran, to my car. Looked back at the building. I could see that indeed there was a window facing the backyard area from that paneled room. Of course, it was covered up from the inside. Dude was shutting and locking the back door. And I left, heart pounding, skin icy cold, thinking, holy fuck, what was that? So was this guy some kind of killer? Or was he just awkward, closeted gay guy with access to a sterile looking apartment with an autopsy mortuary table and a windowless room that locks from the outside with a chair and a phone and no light switch? It's clear to me that the poor soul who walks into that room gets locked in. He probably shuts off the light from somewhere and calls the phone. Other than that, it's anyone's guess what happens. I assume the friend of the judgmental person who emailed me must have been some kid that got locked in for whatever game ensues. That's so freaking creepy. Driving home at first, I thought, of course, I have to call the police and tell them what's in that place. But thinking it through, I realized I didn't really have any crime to tell them about. I went to meet a man for casual sex, and what? He has a room with a chair in it. He has, as I thought at the time, an exam table. The police aren't going to see anything with that story, aren't going to do anything with that story. The guy didn't touch me or do anything to me, and I left. I considered calling an anonymous tip line, but again, what exactly would I report? There was no actionable crime. Also, keep in mind that at that time, while the local police in the city were pretty decent, they weren't especially interested in getting involved with helping the gays. Ugh. The gays. No. Hey, we got a gay calling again. You want to take it? I'm so sorry if you notice any inconsistent lighting throughout this video. It's been taking me until 7:50 p.m. to finish recording this video. This is when I started. Sorry, bear with me. We're gonna get through this. They'd prosecute actual crimes if it was cut and dry, but I'd heard plenty of accounts of them not choosing to follow up on cases where there was not an easy arrest to be made. I decided not to report anything because nothing would come out of it except drawing unwanted attention to myself. Even in retrospect, I think it was probably the most rational choice to make. If this happened today in 2020, the law enforcement would probably be a lot more interested in it. But back then, not so much. So live and learn. I still drove past that house once in a while in the normal course of life for several years, and I'd pay attention to how it looked. The vertical blinds were closed for maybe 5 or 6 years whenever I went past. Then eventually the blinds were down and there were decorative curtains in the window, so I assumed the place was actually sold to someone who actually lived in it. was eventually sold to someone who actually lived in it. Around 2002, maybe 2003, there was a murder of a young man on the news. He'd been found in the next state, which borders on my city, so it's not very far away. I recognized the guy from the gay community. He but didn't know him personally. A friend mentioned to me something about the local serial killer. I said, "What?" He explained that a few young men had gone missing over the past year, each after being at one specific dive bar, and each being found several miles to the north past the state line and out in the country. The case on the news matched up with the MO. My friend told me the young guy had been at that bar and left with someone the night he disappeared. The news reports didn't mention anything about a gay bar or similar recent cases, of course. I had to wonder if my acquaintance from the internet had anything to do with it. My Caribbean almost came out. Anything. I'm not Caribbean. Black American. Why did I do that accent? Don't mind me. Ignore me. The location of the murders apparently was nowhere near that duplex, at least according to the story I was told. I never heard of a resolution to that murder on the news or any official mention of a suspected serial killer other than some gossip. So that happened. Wow. That was such a story. This OP is a great storyteller. I wish it was shorter just because I'm recording it and having technical difficulties, but like genuinely enjoyed reading this. This was a very good read, but I am so sorry you had to experience that. Hopefully it was just a case of a weird dude, maybe socially awkward as well. Hopefully that's just the case. At worst, maybe like you said, a prankster, him pranking kids, which is weird, so fucking weird and awful. Don't know why anybody would do that. This is an extremely great post. Thank you for sharing. Jesus, I wish he had answers. Yeah. Your writing is excellent. Agreed. I'd love to see other pieces you've written, fictional or non-fictional. Second, the story resonates with me in several extremely unsettling ways. I'll tell you what's weird. The first weird thing is that I knew the layout of the duplex you were talking about because a gay ex-friend of mine came to mind immediately when I started reading this. And I'm fairly certain he's a child predator, and he lives in the top part of a duplex exactly like this. Spooky as fuck. That man has done a number of questionable things to me and a mutual friend of ours. The second weird thing here is that I believe a serial killer brought me to his lair a few years ago, and the description of his apartment is eerily similar. The man I went and stayed with had no furniture to speak of. When we arrived at his place, it was eerie. I wonder if serial killers / murderers in general try to avoid having much furniture in the place they use for killings in order to make cleanup easier. Anyway, this story is terrifying and I'm glad you're alive and well. Thank you for telling your story. Oh my god. A eerily good point. Oh, that's so weird. OP responded, yeah, it probably makes things easier to clean. Also, they were not living in that space, so they don't need to outfit it with normal furniture, I guess. About that duplex layout, the one I'm describing in 1940s post-war construction, when a huge number of houses and duplexes were built around here for housing and baby boom. There are many houses that are basically identical to each other. It's probably the same in lots of cities. Very true. That's terrifying. All of these stories were very creepy, very eerie. I enjoyed reading them with you guys today, though. Thank you for joining me, as always. Today was a hair day. Hopefully you can't tell too badly, but I decided to skip on the retwist as I thought about doing at first, but I was like, no, maybe we shouldn't retwist our hair that often. Yeah, we're gonna skip a few weeks of retwist just to allow some more growth and to mitigate as much tension as possible. And yeah, thank you guys again for joining me. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye, smooches. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Beep, beep.
Good on here? Are we good over here? I feel like I'm at a professional setup and I feel very, very uncomfortable.
Call my phone and said you need me, baby. Beep, beep.